extension? Okay.
Yeah. So what we think probably developers are going to do in this situation is say, well, all right, we'll just make them all electric. And so, because that's going to be cheaper for them, and they can probably market that as pro-green, right? The problem with that is that we think it's going to add more to a home cost, and it's certainly going to add more money to the cost of running that home for whoever buys it. Because electricity is more expensive than natural gas, even though natural gas is definitely going up.
Yeah.
Natural gas is also a lot more efficient. It's about 93% efficient in terms of the use of the actual substance. Electricity is somewhere around 35%. So, electricity to run, especially in mountain areas, to run a heat pump is going to be a lot more expensive. It's also going to cost $10,000 to $15,000 more, or $10,000 to $15,000 just for that unit. There's some debate about whether they work in cold climates, but I think that they've gotten the technology to make them work, but they're more expensive. Like, I was talking to a guy that worked for the Aspen Skiing Company recently, and he was telling me that, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Snowmass, the ski mountain, but on the far side it was called Elk Camp, and it's a huge facility. It's right in the middle. It's where the gondola ends at Snowmass, and it's big, and it's all run on a heat pump. And this is running a heat pump at like 10,000 feet. Right. So, I mean, I think the technology's there. It's just a lot more expensive. So there's that aspect of the clean heat bill, which really is kind of is something that I have heard. So there was a guy, I wasn't exactly that familiar with it, and at the Grand Junction meeting, I was talking to a developer, and he was heated.
Yeah.
He was like, I wish, and it's also, it's not in the bill. So I was talking to one of our regulatory guys just to prepare for this, to make sure that I had kind of my ducks in a row. And he's like, what we think, so the PUC also, on the other hand, while trying to do all of these things, likes to say, but there's no ban. There's no natural gas ban proposed on any of this. However, what they're kind of doing is boxing it out at every.
It's pulling you out of it all.
To make it more difficult for natural gas to go in. I mean, it's going to be pretty difficult, I think, for anywhere in the state to have new natural gas infrastructure coming up. This is coming from the state, the PUC, the legislature, plus on the municipal level in places like Aspen, the Salt, Telluride, Ridgeway.
Well, because even if you move to solar, and because you have to store energy and there are things that you need to do, you're still connected with your electrical company. And if there is an outage, you're still out, whether you have solar or not, depending on how it's set up, unless you're off the grid. Like my setup is, if I'm out, if I have an outage, I have a generator that kicks in and it runs on natural gas because it's more reliable. Right?
Yeah. And all of that said, Black Hills is into wind. We're into solar. We have renewable natural gas projects where we can take methane that's being emitted from. We have a project with the city of Lincoln, Nebraska, where we take the methane coming out of their landfill and inject it back into our pipelines. So that kind of thing, and what the clean heat plan is saying, like you can do it all kinds of different ways, hydrogen, various renewable natural gas, and all of this kind of thing, but it's kind of hard to say. So Black Hills, again, to finish that thought, Black Hills is, we live here next to you all. Our techs live, we have a lot of customers in Montrose here. Like over 13,500 is the biggest concentration on the western slope of anywhere. So, but we live next to, we don't want, summers full of wildfire smoke and winters with no snow. We don't want that any more than anybody else wants it. So we have like our electrical side, which provides on the Front Range as well as these other states, had submitted a plan to provide 79% of our electrical power from renewable sources by, I think it's 2030. But I recently heard an Xcel Energy VP speak at a Club 20 meeting, and she actually had the same. She's like, we don't think that renewables should be more than 80%. That other 20% needs to be something, whether it's natural gas, whether it's something else. It needs to be something as a backup. And the other thing to consider too about natural gas is that all this infrastructure is already in the ground.
Yeah.
So like hydrogen's a ways off, but if we could figure out a way to make hydrogen, you can use the same infrastructure for cleaner energy. And just to complete sort of that, one of the things about natural gas too, is that if you're a diligent company like Black Hills and we keep cameras on our pipelines, we've replaced all of our unprotected pipe with protected steel and plastic, 99% of it, and the rest of it's going to go in the next year or so. If you can diligently keep up your infrastructure, you can really control these greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, it's a carbon source, but it's also, you can mitigate a lot of the emissions. So I'll take any questions before I get to kind of what you all can do coming up here to sort of make your voices known if in fact you don't agree with what the PUC is doing with what,
Why isn't there, or is there anybody at the PUC level or on that committee that is trying to back the gas? I don't understand.
not really.
I understand that the clean heat bills, that all starts from the top of who's running our country. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it is negatively affecting all of us, including what you're talking about. But what I don't understand is why the PUC is so blinded. Is it because they're all about electricity?
Well, I mean, what they're concentrated on is climate change.
Yeah.
They're trying to decarbonize energy, and that's what they want to do.
That's my point. Is they're on the same drug that
on a cake. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, something, that, again, like we're not a bunch of climate change deniers. Like clearly something is happening. Clearly something needs to be done to clean up the energy system in the United States. Clearly something. However, in a lot of ways, it's going a little bit too fast. The technology is not quite there.
Yeah.
And frankly, places like Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, they're not going to go rush to just plug everything in. However, if everybody did that,
We would have
the
a
electrical
problem.
system
Yeah,
in this
that's
country, the grid needs
my
about
concern.
$450 billion worth of upgrades to be able to handle all.
Yeah.
But so as we do that, right, and especially here with DMEA being owned by members and just separated themselves from Tri-County, correct? And being on their own, finding, sources of energy where they can, as we grow in electric usage and we start having electric cars and other things, isn't it true that they won't be able to handle it and we'll have more and more outbreak? Like, that's why I'm connected to natural
look at
gas with
Look at California right now.
That's-
We have a
exactly.
huge heat wave right now,
Yeah.
and they have all these, it hasn't happened yet, but they have all these warnings from PG&E saying there could be rolling blackouts because of capacity issues. Crested Butte.
rolling
just
blackouts,
became-
that's what I heard, that's what we're
Yeah.
gonna have to do.
Crested
So-
Butte just became the first city in Colorado to ban natural gas. And I think I find it a little bit ironic in that, like, that's the coldest part of the state.
I know.
Honestly, Crested Butte is,
It's so weird. It's like you want to sit back and go, what do you think?
well, maybe it's gonna work and maybe it's not, but we'll see.
I guess they have, so the Public Utilities Commission,
You can
usually
delete
their video, so do they have like, when they're proposing these things, do they have like, this is documentation on like
Yeah.
feasibility studies or like cost benefit analysis or any of the stuff that
They
is
have,
standard practice?
They have some of it. One of at both of those meetings, especially the Grand Junction one, people were really hammering Commissioner Gavin on cost benefit analysis.
There's no way.
A lot of what they're doing, they're putting on to say utilities to come up with a plan to be able to do it. I saw, who Senator Bob Rankin is from the northwestern part of the state. I saw him, he's a fairly moderate Republican from up in there. And he was talking about how the state, up at this Club 20 meeting, how the state has a plan, has a goal, but not a plan.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. So that's kind of
That's great.
speaking to that.
That's
However,
great.
in most cost benefit analysis for electricity, it's gonna be more expensive. And, it's also a little bit concerning on an equity basis in that you're putting a lot of this on the backs of the working class. Because, the 20,000 square foot houses on Red Mountain and Aspen are not possible to run on electricity. You can't run an Olympic-sized swimming pool or your driveway melt, or, some of those houses up there, I'm told by some of our techs, have bigger gas meters and take more gas than some little towns that we provide gas.
Oh,
to.
yeah,
Honestly.
it's freezing over there. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
issues, I think, that get glossed over in that. So,
Action plan, what can we do?
so one of
Yeah.
the things that's coming up that would be, I was talking to one of our regulatory guys, Matt Christopherson, last night, and he said, written comments are great. Written comments really help if you submit them to the PUC, and the PUC commissioners say that they read all those written comments. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. There's a live hearing, a PUC hearing on September 19th,
Here,
and it's
What
in
is that again? I'm sorry.
September 19th, and I have the link on my email that I can send to like a realtor
So that's
email.
exactly, yeah.
And
Where
what
at?
you can do, you don't have to go to Denver or Boulder or whatever they're holding it. You can dial up on Zoom, and you can put your name in the queue to speak about it, a minute, and just say, look, here's my opinion about what you're doing here. That's something that makes a big difference. At both of these meetings, Commissioner Gavin was really repeatedly saying, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. So I think part of it is that, I've lived in most of my adult life in pretty progressive areas. I lived in Aspen for 7 years. I've lived in Santa Fe. I've lived in places like that. And I think what a lot is happening is that people ask you, are you for fighting climate change? Are you? And of course, everybody's, yes, of course, but they don't understand that, a lot of these things, especially when it comes to natural gas, can be a lot more nuanced and a lot more subtle. And when you start kind of where the rubber meets the road and what your electric bill is going to be, and
The ideal versus the reality.
Yeah.
exactly,
That's right.
and technology's coming along quick.
Yeah.
It's coming along. Just 10 years ago, the percentage of renewables in this state was like 10 to 15%. It's now 35%.
Yeah.
But the other 65% comes from natural gas and coal.
Yeah.
Coal. And Black Hills actually closed our last coal-fired power plant 10 years ago in the state.
Oh, really?
So we have a big natural gas plant down in Pueblo that we think is a good backup for a lot of this renewable stuff when the sun's not shining, when
Right.
there's a major cold snap in mid-January and it's 10 below in the mountains, So that's definitely one thing you can do, and encourage customers, encourage your colleagues that didn't show up here today to really make those comments and let their voices be heard.
What is, because like with this town hall that happened, here, the night before, I got a stream of emails forwarded to me that even was explaining that, telling that this was even happening.
Right.
I sent it out to the realtors, me and one other gal showed up, from that. Where was Vicky Jones? She was the one.
Yeah, Debbie was there too.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
opened up a
Yeah,
can on
she
him.
launched
Yeah.
on, but, and it was my brother that was doing the.
Debbie was there,
questions.
Valerie Myers.
He had some good questions.
It all runs in your family.
Yeah, well, no,
Half of us are
yeah, but
related.
he's very well informed, so he did have some good questions.
He was,
walked
yeah,
up
that's
for
what
us. They have no idea how they can answer his questions. But why is this not being sent out? Why are we not being informed, by the commissioners? I mean, do you
Yeah,
know that? I know I'm not trying to throw that on.
I don't know
you.
exactly what the commissioners did to publicize that. I mean, their publicity guy was in the room and sort of,
Mhm. Yeah, he
acted kind
really
of
said,
defensively,
we tried.
to that. Coming from the media, I sympathize with them to get the word out. It goes a lot over people's heads. I mean, you can put hundreds of ads out there, and
Yeah.
people still aren't going to see them. I don't
Just
I don't know the answers to that
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
of what
We
we're
feel your
answering.
pain. Yeah.
But I do think that it's taken a while to sink in, for Black Hills, and again, I'm kind of new, but watching how they've come to take this a little more seriously, it's taken some time considering they're coming from, so we had a woman who came out from Black Hills is headquartered in Rapid City, South Dakota. She came out for Strawberry Days in Glenwood, and we had a booth there, and we got some hostility from people, you know, are you the frackers, this kind of stuff. And she was totally shocked by that, because she said, you know, when we set up in Rapid City, they love us. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, it's a little different over here, but it's taken time to really sink in, and that's where you guys can really come in, because you're boots on the ground people.
Yeah.
You're talking to people all the time. You've got contacts with just regular people. You've got contacts in the business community, and say, look, this electrification stuff is going on. Aspen, and so one of the things, like Basalt wants to ban natural gas in new construction by 2025. They want to ban new residential construction by 25, all construction by 2031. That's new construction. Now, what you can extrapolate from all of these rules that places like Aspen and Basalt, Carbondale, and Eagle are putting in, is that eventually they're going to come around and say, you have to retrofit your houses to make these climate goals real. You have to spend the money to replace your gas heater, your gas, eventually probably that's what most people who are looking at it think that is going to happen. Now, there's nothing afoot at this point to force any retrofitting, that kind of stuff. And frankly, you know, I'm going to refer to some people from Xcel that I've heard talk about this. Xcel's got 1.5 million electrical customers here and 1.4 gas, so they can hedge their bets a little bit.
Right.
But he was saying, you know, natural gas can't go anywhere for a while. You can't run a hospital without natural gas. You can't run a college campus without natural gas. You can't run big buildings, plus industry. A lot of industrial, you know, people want to go relocate in Basalt, and there was supposed to be a bakery there, and the guy was like, you can't do this on electricity,
Right.
you know? So what he was saying, a lot of people, what may start to happen is that residential people may be like, all right, well, you know, I feel like I'm climate conscious and green, and so what I'm gonna do is replace my gas water heater with an electric water heater. You know, but I'm gonna keep my gas furnace for a while until technology maybe catches up to it a little bit better, becomes a little bit cheaper. And, you know, eventually maybe these things are going to be cheaper and better for the climate, and better to replace these things. However, you're still going to want backup. I mean, a lot of wind generators, you know, when the wind's not blowing, those things turn by natural gas. So, and every kind of energy's got some kind of impact.
Yeah.
You know, you can't recycle solar panels. So when those are done, they're going to fill up landfills. Carbon, those blades on the wind turbines are made of carbon fiber, because if they're made of steel, they'd fall down to the ground because they'd be too heavy. So, you know, everything's got, and with good mitigation on natural gas, it can't help but be a good backup to a lot of these things, we think, so.
Well, I appreciate hearing that, you know, a lot of these gas companies are going back and retrofitting things and making them safer. Because I think that's one of the things that, you know, especially like the BP oil is what they call, where people were a little bit skeptical. I think climate change is one of those, like, it's a natural event. Like, I think no matter what, whether man's here or not, the Earth is going to be, you know, ice ages and heat ages. You know, just natural happened before, it'll happen again. My fear with going to pure electric is like what happened in Texas, like I think last winter or a winter ago, where their power grids went out, and I mean, they were freezing.
The stories were horrific.
Or, you know, even a
Literally.
layer above that, so if you start getting hackers or things like that, who are, you know, coming in and attacking power grids, and that is our only line of infrastructure for heating. I mean, those are things that I hope people are thinking about, because I think there's other things than just energy. If it's all electric, you have a hacker come in and they shut it down, and that's bad news.
Or it's 114 in Central Valley in California, everybody turns their air conditioning on.
Or a Tesla,
You know, and then what are you gonna do?
They locked themselves out by signing up for that program that, you know, 78
Right.
degrees, it won't let you go up or down, and that
It's
just
a
happened
case
a
of-
couple of days ago.
Putting all your eggs in one
Well,
basket.
yeah,
Who wants to
You
do
said
that?
hospitals, you're talking about hospitals, I mean, that's life or death.
Yeah, national infrastructure, I think it's very
I
dangerous.
don't understand who you're having to compete with. I don't understand it.
Well,
I mean, because
I guess-
it's so,
Here's the thing, we want to walk a pretty fine line here, because we can't, we don't want to be adversarial because we are trying to clean up the energy. We want to be part of a cleaner energy United States. We
Yeah.
do. And so, but we also, frankly, want to continue selling natural gas too.
Yeah.
And also believe that a good case can be made for natural gas being the cleanest. It's a carbon energy source, but it's the cleanest burning.
Yeah.
It's super efficient. Every kind of energy's got an impact. And if you can really reduce those greenhouse gas emissions by paying really close attention. I had to your infrastructure. So one of the things too, I'm hoping to be able to get Black Hills to start this program, but in regard to gas stoves. So that's a big deal that's come up recently. There was a study that Stanford University did at the beginning of the year that showed that they leak and that they have volatile organic compounds and this kind of thing. But the 75% of the leaks were coming from stoves that were off. And they were extrapolating that's because they sit there for 30 years and the connections get a little bit loose.
Yeah.
And to me, that is entirely fixable. It's the
Yeah.
exact same thing as infrastructure maintenance, So I want Black Hills to start a program where people call us up and say, look, can you come check my stove? And if anything, look through your X-ray vision, see what's leaking, fix the couplings that are old, and let's stop 75% of those leaks. These things can be mitigated.
I think Black Hills does that here.
I think they do it for the, I think they do it for your pipeline to the house.
Well,
We do have a program called, I think it's Home Pro or Serve Pro or one of these things. And there's a couple of them and I can't, but it could be part of that where.
I think, I have had it.
Well, it's last year, gas prices went up so much, people were freaking out, and I think they came out and replaced a lot of meters, and did some leak checks and stuff like that to put people at ease.
Yeah.
There were some emotions around it.
This thing's just ringing.
Do we know, is this on RPACs?
Say that again.
Our pack, I would think so.
You know, I'll have to like double check on that, because that's actually a really good question.
That's the question?
Our PAC is the real estate party here in Colorado, and so we choose what to side with or help with, so we would have to see what bill are involved with our PAC.
Well, this clean heat bill's already passed.
Yeah.
We are required to, we have to submit a plan by, I think, mid next year, July of 23, I believe, that's gonna say, here's how we're going to abide by these rules. But that 4% by the 2015 baseline. It would be nice to get some momentum from organizations like yours, HVAC, general contractors, fireplace
Developers,
people,
all that.
developers, everybody, because
Because they build
Obvious,
anything, you know what I mean?
Even solar, my solar guy literally told me, don't go with a backup battery, go with a generator that runs on natural gas, because if something serious happens, that's the only way you're gonna get heat.
And, frankly, natural gas infrastructure goes down far less frequently than electrical infrastructure. I was at Aspen when somebody did that terrorism thing a couple of years ago, where they did you guys know about this?
I just know you talk to any of the guys that work for WAPA or any of these electrical,
What happened?
companies, and they just tell you it's always like.
So what happened was between Christmas and New Year's, a couple of years ago, where there's, Aspen usually has a population of about 6,500 people, but Christmas, it's about 35,000.
Yeah.
And so somebody went and messed with the valves in 3 different areas of Black Hills property around Aspen and knew exactly what they were doing because they shut the gas off to the entire city, and the hospital is sitting right outside of it in the Castle Creek Valley, and it was right on the edge, still had service. They knew what they were doing, but shut it down. And so Black Hills had to come in and repressurize the entire system, and they had to go physically turn off everybody's meter and then physically turn it back on. 3,500 people. I was one of the ones without heat. They brought in a truckload of space heaters for everybody. It was a big deal. It cost us $1.5 million because we imported techs from all over the country to come in and because there was a big snowstorm that happened. It's between Christmas and New Year's. It's cold in Aspen.
Yeah.
So but as an example of infrastructure going down, that's a highly unusual sort of a thing. But think about how often your power goes out.
Yeah.
Regularly.
Regular.
I live south of town and it's out all the time. It's weird, the power, electricity. It's just, and when mine goes out where I live, it goes out for hours. It's not a 10 minutes.
Well, and you know,
That's
even if I didn't work for a natural gas company, I wouldn't want all my eggs in one basket. You
Yeah.
know, if that, you would want that kind of backup. Yes, I want to be as clean as possible with the energy that I'm using, but when it comes down to January and my electricity goes out and I don't have any heat, I'd like to have some kind of a, you know, backup. So,
Well, you're my backup.
well, you're our backup, you know, please keep in mind, let me see if I can forward this.
Yeah, give us some contact information and we'll.
Yeah.
I specifically,
I'll tell you what, this country's turned into a wreck.
It's crazy to implement something without a plan.
It's just
Like,
amazing.
Square one, right?
Yeah, like, for me, it's like, when you're talking about goals, like, when
That's
you
the
have a
gist
goal,
of
you
it.
have a plan to get to the goal, otherwise it's just great. You can't like formulate how you do dream.
Oh, hey, Damien, just saw this.
So, like,
What's interesting is we were talking to the attorney that
Yeah.
was there, and he said, we know that our initiative is working, because we were driving over